Okay, our presentation is Big Data and Analytics. It is for UIS in NYS 523C in the spring of 2015. And I'm working with Seth Aiken, Leisha Beasley. I'm Casey Myers, and Sally Hott Turnbow, and Sean Williams. The introduction. So basically, individuals are discovering that the combination of big data analytics may lead to a reduction of their privacy. And I do have a video to kind of go over a little bit of like some of the basics on big data and if we should be concerned or not.
You are like millions of other people, you have a cell phone. And you probably also have some sort of card that you use to pay for things. It could be a credit card, a debit card. It could be, Diners Club, but that might be different. And odds are, if you're watching this video, you are overwhelmingly likely to have an internet connection. Here's the thing about these three kinds of communication, these three sorts of medium of transaction. They all leave a little trail of breadcrumbs behind. And every little breadcrumb, every 1 0, every piece of data, location, financial, health-wise, about you can be sold from the people who gathered it originally to other people and amassed. And together these can form a strange, unique fingerprint, an ID, a profile of you. And that is big data. So welcome to the show. We've got Matt behind.
So as you can imagine from what we just heard, big data analytics, they can capture all your data from your cell phone, from any communications that you have. They can use that information. They can sell it to other companies. And really there's so many privacy concerns that people should be like really aware of. There's really not a lot of current laws regarding individual privacy. Which these are kind of just some of the base points that I'll go into more detail below. But the use of private data by organizations, as he said, and hopefully, there's going to be a lot of proposed changes to the policy and regulations. Some of the big data analytics and concepts, like he said, they get a fingerprint from everything that you have. So you're getting a lot of meaningful pattern from large amounts of data. There's conditions where privacy methods are unusable, and you're able to identify data subjects using correlations found in different analysis tools. Some of the areas that maybe he touched on a little bit about data collection that they have healthcare records, criminal justice, financial, ethnicity, location, utility use, online activity. HIPAA is one of the things that's very important with our healthcare records, that there aren't people that are accessing the HIPAA it's one of the laws that they have put together, so people are not using your healthcare data, and you should feel protected and that it's not freely available and people aren't misusing it. One of the other concerns is just the profiling. They can discriminate, they can exclude you, and you lose control over your data. So everything that you're doing online or that is being communicated through emails, just anything electronic, we don't have access to it sometimes. One of the things that while I was reading and researching this subject, there was a man that he had got a pacemaker put in, and he was very interested in some of the data that they were collecting from, like, his heart. So whether his exercise levels, his diet, what he did during the day, he kept a journal. And within that journal, he had just everything that he knew that he did within the times and everything. And he went to the doctors and talked to them about it and asked them if they could get that data to him. So they got him in touch with the company that owns the pacemaker, or that sold him the pacemaker, and they said, sorry, sir, that data is private, and we are not going to release it to you, even though it was his own data. So it's kind of a crazy case, but it happens more often than you probably even know. If you were looking, say, for Amazon, they collect all your data and everything that you buy, and they give you referrals of everything they think you might want to buy. But if you ask them for the actual analytics behind it and the data that they've collected over you, I'm pretty sure they're not going to give it to you. Um, some protection methods that definitely you should be using is anonymization, some encryption, some key coding. I do have another video that is pretty good. Edward Snowden recently, he has been in the news for a lot of different things, but one of the things is how the NSA was collecting data on just everyone in a whole, and it wasn't just the criminals, and how you should encrypt your information if you don't want people to get it and you want to have some privacy. I've got a little video here. It's just a little clip. He kind of goes into like a little more specifics.
Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector, anywhere.
Anyone.
Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly have the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
One of the extraordinary parts about this episode is...
So, as he said, they can target anyone. They can get any of this information. You have something out there of private email to your boyfriend, your husband, girlfriend, whatever. They can get that information. Pictures is another one that, in my research, I have found that it was within the NSA's culture to... If there was a picture of some, if there's a picture that somebody probably didn't want someone else to see, and they're sending it privately to someone they did want to see, they would have that picture and they would send it around to people within the NSA. Kind of scary. So the automated decision making, they basically have algorithms where they can discriminate against people depending on what specifics they put out there. And with social networking, everybody's putting everything out there. So there's a lot of sensitive information that you might not realize that people are using. Facebook's selling a lot of that information to their companies so they can market towards you and so on. And another couple correlations of data being exposed to sensitive information is Target. So there was a young girl that they, according to all their information that they had on her, they sent her, they had a pregnancy score. And they started sending her things in emails that basically said, they were diapers and things like that, like she might actually be pregnant. And another one was they were able to predict the possibility of somebody having Alzheimer's just from the data that they collect. Walmart is another one that was using Facebook. Facebook was selling them information of people's birthdays of that person, so they could specifically target them to emails that around the times of other people's birthdays with things that they thought that they might be able to use, or they would buy for gifts. AOL was another one, which it's beyond me how AOL is still around, but they are still pretty powerful. They had, you could search for names, social security numbers, identifying information, and it really makes you think about these companies and some of the disclosures that maybe when you just click that box, like, yeah, it's okay, it's like it's this credit card, this discount, they're doing a lot more than what they are telling you they're doing. So this kind of gets into like a little bit of like the regulation with the different with the privacy regulations. So it's not standardized, it's not consistent. U.S. federal state laws do not agree on what's considered personal information. The U.S. treats privacy as interests balanced against other interests, sometimes secondary to freedom of speech. There's a notification and consent method where organizations must explain data processing activities. They must be able to read and understand them, and individual grants consent of use by the services. So a lot of times there is a consent, and it's just that little box that you press to say, hey, yeah, it's okay. Like on our phones, we download apps all the time. They're free apps, but when you actually look into the details of everything that they can look at within your phone, they have all that data. That data is there for them to use for whatever reason that they want to use it for. Sell it to other people, market things towards you, or NSAs. Older methods. I think they were using it for a lot of things that they shouldn't have been using it for. As I talked about before, privacy laws are very important. Your healthcare information, you don't want that getting into the wrong hands, and plus it's private to you. You don't want other people to know about your spending habits. Certainly not companies that are going to try to get into your brain, market towards you. Hey, I think you want this. You probably don't need it. And then the purchasing choices, as I mentioned before, they'll try to influence you into purchasing things that possibly aren't within your price range and you don't really need. So what happens to personal information? There's healthcare stuff that, I would like to think that is, still one of the last things that is pretty private that, people haven't been able to get into. But who's to say once all these records are electronic that they're not putting a profile on all these people? They use it for marketing, and they also use it for supply chain management. Should these companies be doing this? Target with their team privacy assumption, Walmart, social app data mining, and AOL releasing private internet searches. And as I mentioned before, NSA collecting all that information. They can have any type of online communication that you've ever had with anyone, and they can get it even to the president's level. That is just absolutely mind-blowing. So what can we do to fix this? Can we have more federal regulation? Increase user awareness? Certainly. I don't think people put it all together what these companies are actually doing with our data. They a lot of times like, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't care what they do. Well, that's good. You're not doing anything wrong, but it's our privacy that's being invaded, and at any point, at any time, they could go to your Gmail, or they could go to your Yahoo Mail, or they could go to whatever, and they could figure out a whole entire profile on you, and that doesn't make me feel very comfortable. There's not really a whole lot of corporate transparency, but there should be, and they should increase that, and if anything, lawmakers should get in there, and, it's their data that's being compromised as well, so should be more concerned about it. So it comes to the conclusion. There's, benefits including optimizing public services. They improve healthcare, possibly education, and battling against fraud. They, I think, are moving towards those things, but sometimes it is not so much a proactive approach. It's a retroactive one, and that normally is not a very good case. You should always be thinking ahead, because a lot of things that have already happened, they already have that data, and, they own it at this point. And certainly there should be negative outcomes that happen to companies, like Target or AOL or, any of the other ones that I've spoke about. Like, they should be held very accountable. So there is, some regulation they're putting together. They have this President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, where they recommend policies and regulation. They've got these three, I guess, departments with the Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights Act, the Student Digital Privacy Act, and the Personal Data Notification Protection Act. So, I think those things are all good. It's future policy development. And it will play a role in how organizations handle big data and analytics. And here are some of the references that we used. And I do have a final video that I wanted to show to you that it's kind of funny because it starts out 4 scary things about big data and you. And this guy pretty much sums the rest
Behind
of
the
it
camera,
up.
I'm Ben. That makes this stuff they don't want you to know. And let me amend that definition of big data here. Big data is just an umbrella term for a massive amount of information. It could be stuff like where does Matt go every Thursday at 4:27 p.m. or what does Ben always buy online or stuff like that. But not just for us two, scaled up to an entire population, even a global population. And from this, there's this idea that we can predict trends. We can make people more likely to do, say, or buy what we want them to do, say, or buy. And we hear a lot of misinformation about this stuff, a lot of sensationalism, but there are some things that are truly scary about big data. Here are 4. Number 1. Big data can be used to learn your secrets. And we're not just talking about, those songs that you hum to yourself at stoplights and would be embarrassed if people found out about it, like Blinded by the Light or Call Me Maybe or something, right? We're talking about stuff like medical records that could impact your standing, maybe at your job, maybe with your insurance. We're talking about stuff like banking records that could have the same sort of impact. We're talking about maybe addiction issues, secret vices, illicit affairs. Things like that can be reconstructed from these little pieces of information we leave behind, not just on internet searches, but on stuff like your GPS. A fellow named Tim Sparapani, who is a VP at the Application Developers Alliance.
Okay, so you get the point. There is just a lot that has to do with the big data and analytics. I know this has gone a little bit long, and hopefully you've enjoyed my presentation. I appreciate everybody that has worked with me. Seth, Leisha, Sally, and Sean. This is the presentation, and I hope all have enjoyed. Thank you.